Welcome back to Living Limitless. The intention of this series is to support women as we recalibrate ourselves with our intentions, getting back to that innate wisdom inside of you, hearing from leaders who have walked through shame and come out the other side empowered and tapping back into their joy, their courage, their freedom. And they'll be sharing with you some tactics, some techniques, some tools, some processes that you could incorporate into your life if you're ever feeling out of your value system or off your vibration, that you can come back to some of these skills or even to some of these stories that these women are sharing. My name is Andrea Luzon. I am a legacy liberator and sacred freedom coach. Basically, I'm a guide. I support women on a journey to return to their own authority. And we work together to reestablish their power, their passion, and their purpose in their life. So today we have with us Zoe Etkin. She's going to share some of her knowledge and what she practices. And so Zoe, welcome. And I'd love for you to introduce yourself.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate being here and sharing about what I do with moms specifically. So for the past 10 years, I've been a birth and postpartum doula, a childbirth educator, and women's sexual wellness advocate. And I'm shifting into more coaching-based work, what I'm calling postpartum and motherhood transformation guide. And in a way, it's very related to what I hear you doing as well, where we're helping women to find what makes them feel whole and what makes them feel like a person, mine in the lens of the postpartum experience or just motherhood in general. Because so many of us are feeling so lost in our identities after we go through this process of birth, and it doesn't have to be that way. And I think with the right support and guidance, you can get there much faster than what I see a lot of, which is women who are, maybe 18 to 20 years postpartum and looking around and being like, I don't know who I am now that I'm not in this role of caregiver all of the time. And I hope our generation can do that sooner, can start cultivating that from the very beginning of their postpartum journey, so that they feel there's not this, oh, I have to give myself away for 20 years until I can find myself again, that I think has been happening for mothers of past generations. So my mission right now is just to help us all get there faster, so that we can step into this multidimensional version of ourselves, that we don't have to be one thing. And that's what I'm finding is the most important in the work that I've been doing. Even as a doula, it was just kind of coming up. So I'm just going to really do that now fully. So I'm really excited to be stepping into that.
I remember the first time that we spoke when you used the phrase multidimensional identity. That definitely struck a chord with me, and just how you're standing for women having space and having support to look at who do I feel called to be outside of motherhood. What else is, I often use the phrase a voice knocking on the inside, or you feel or you sense a knocking going on inside of you. And it's interesting how we can run away from that and stay busy, because if we don't really slow down and maybe give ourselves some self-care practices, we're not going to even be tuned into what is that voice saying. And I'm totally guilty of this in this, not that this is a shame thing, but yeah, just staying so busy that I don't make time. In the past, I haven't made time to listen to that intuitive guidance that we all have.
Absolutely. Yeah. And we're not supported culturally to do that either. And so I feel like people like us are fitting in these roles that are gaps in the culture, saying, no, this is important and it's okay to spend time, and it's not selfish, and it actually will make you a better mom. It will make you a better person and make you feel more yourself, to take the time to go through these sometimes very painful processes of this deep introspection that's necessary. So I love that you're already thinking about that as well, because I'm always looking for more people who get it. You know what I mean?
Yes, avoiding the inner voice or only listening to the inner critic, but not
Right.
listening to the other inner voice that is holding you high, holding you high to walk towards your highest good. It feels like there's the other voice that's saying, you're not good enough, don't even try, or it's too risky. What if you fail? All of that stuff. So,
Yeah.
what role, Zoe, do you feel that shame plays in our lives as we reawaken to our joy, playfulness, courage, freedom?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a huge part of why, and in my context, working with mothers, and so that's really the context that I know, and for my own self. But I think there is so much shame in this culture overall, that when we look at when we become a mother, there's these narratives there that they're telling you what a good mother is, what a bad mother is, and they're constantly playing out in your own mind and sort of metabolized in a way that sound like self-talk, but they're not really yours. They're really coming from this other source, which could be cultural narratives. It could be media and Hollywood depictions of motherhood that I think are very influential on what we know mothers to be at this time. And then they could be generational narratives or generational traumas that are just coming through on more of a spiritual level that you don't even realize are not really you. It's not really coming from a place within you. It is external, but it's been metabolized, like I said, so that you feel like you're telling yourself, like, I'm a bad, I yelled at my kid, I'm such a bad mom. I
Right.
mean, I've definitely had those moments myself, where I've done something that I know is not good mom behavior, and I'm like basically ready to go jump off a bridge with shame because I feel
Mhm.
so bad, that I made that mistake. And there's no space in this parenting culture on either side for fathers too to cultivate self-forgiveness in our mistakes as parents.
Mhm.
Um, and so I try to do that with my clients as well, like kind of, saying up front with them as parents of babies, like, you're going to fuck up. It's
Mhm.
going to happen. But we have to accept that we're not perfect parents, despite what we've been told that looks like. And the more we recognize that and remind ourselves of that, then the self-forgiveness piece can come in and say, that was a really hard moment. I'm in a stressed state, and my nervous system is not in a state where I can think clearly enough to respond in the way I wish I had. So then we say, I forgive myself for that because I was out of control in that moment or whatever. And then the repair piece comes in with the child, even with the baby. I certainly encourage that as well. I'm sorry, mommy was upset or whatever you want to say. Um, that tool has been really important for me to step out of that shame of like not being the perfect mom and not doing it right all the time.
Mhm.
Because I had so many expectations of myself going into that role, from being a doula, from my own mother, of the way she parented me. And, I think a lot of people come to reconcile their own upbringing earlier than I did because I don't know, I agreed so much with my parents, and I was just like, we were just a little unit, the three of us. And I didn't have to rebel against them in that teenage years like so many people do, because I just really was, simpatico in a way. And then coming into my own mothering, I was like, oh wow, I'm a really different parent than my mom. She's way more patient than I am. Not to say that she, I certainly have idealized her at times. I think we do that with our own motherhood lineage sometimes.
Mhm.
Uh, but then having to reconcile and having shame around the fact that I wasn't my own mother
Mhm.
was very painful and came very late in my life compared to, like I'm saying, maybe when you're 14 or so, you're like, oh, my parents suck, I'm gonna do, that didn't really happen. And then I'm like, oh, I'm 30 years old just figuring this out, that I'm not her and I'm not gonna do it like her. And that I'm feeling these moments of pain that I'm not doing it like she did it because I'm just not her. And that was a very interesting process for me, kind of
Mhm.
working my own self-judgment around that. And um, and not really being prepared for that to happen either.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm hearing awareness, so that shame definitely plays a role in our evolution or our
Mhm.
return to our childlike wonder. Yet I'm hearing you say like awareness, like where are we judging ourselves, and then offering compassion. And I know that there are so many exercises available, opportunities to practice compassion and forgiveness. And I love what you said about apologizing. That
Mhm.
is something I think when we're ashamed of how we've behaved, I think our society kind of glorifies just sweeping it under the rug. Like, let's just all put our heads down and pretend that moment didn't happen. Because universe forbid we actually talk about our feelings. Like, I was not my best person in that moment. I love you, I value you. Mommy was, I really wasn't living my values in that moment and showing up for you the way that I believe you deserve. And I'm sorry.
And that's how we break the shame cycles, right? Is by doing that. Because when we don't do that, then that just imprints on our kids. And I do feel like, yes, I'm working for mothers and I'm trying to help mothers transform and feel better in their experience. But sorry if you hear some curtain rustles, it's the cat. She's trying to get in the window over here. But it's about what I'm doing to help them set up to be parents long term as well, because they're going to be taking care of a person who is going to become an adult and the cycle continues,
Mhm.
and that's a way that I can help break some of these generational
Mm.
uh, cycles for people. It's just giving them this space to understand what's happening. It's not
Mm.
talked about in most, and then they can have that self awareness, like,
Yeah.
oh, now I see that this is something I need to cultivate as this practice of
Right.
relating to my child in this respectful way. So yeah.
Yeah, it's like a muscle that we get to learn how to flex, because possibly it wasn't modeled for us.
Mm. Yeah, and you
Yeah.
have to reconcile that upbringing. I mean, that's something I'm often doing with people is looking at, how were you mothered?
Yeah.
What was that experience like for you? And how is that coming into your own mothering now? So many people will say, I think I just was my mother, like I just channeled my mother in that moment or whatever. That was my mother's
Yeah,
voice.
or I'm becoming my mom. I'm like, no. Or it's like, I'm becoming my mom. Yes. But both of those are judgments. I'd like to repeat something out loud that I think I heard you say. Sometimes when individuals use the phrase intergenerational trauma, I think for even for myself just a few months ago, that sounded heavy and a little ethereal, like a little bit out there, like not really tangible. But when you put it that way, of that example that I gave, where it's simply apologizing for not showing up the way that you, as the mother that you want to show up as, even just pointing that out to our kids, or maybe our friends, in a friendship, to just be vulnerable and say, wow, I totally didn't realize that the way those words came out of my mouth was possibly harmful to you or hurting your feelings. And not that we have to walk on eggshells, but okay, so let me back up. So where I'm going is that the intergenerational trauma in just that apologizing to your kids example, to me, it makes it much more tangible that their parents probably, if our parents didn't apologize to us and share vulnerably and openly when they were in some kind of emotional breakdown, if it was just like silence or yelling or maybe some behaviors we don't want to repeat, so their parents probably also showed them. Now your cat's on camera. But so yeah, and so it can go back generations of this. Don't talk about feelings. Apologizing is weakness. Um, Stop crying. It's not that, like, you're so lucky. You have no right to cry because your life is so great. It's interesting. So when you are phrasing it that way, and that we get to cultivate a practice, so we're really just flexing a new muscle of vulnerably sharing when we didn't show up in the way we would like to show up. and that we think we might have hurt someone's feelings, or we might have, you know, made someone feel bad about themselves in our how we were showing up. So for me, that really makes it so much more practical, because intergenerational trauma sometimes sounds like 4 generations ago, grandma like cut her big foot or cut her big toe off of her right foot. And now I have like pain in my big right toe. You know, and just sometimes sometimes that just feels like a bit, yeah, ethereal. It feels like not tangible, like
Mhm.
so far removed. Whereas this repeated simple this a repeated simple behavior just feels easier to swallow, and
Mhm.
like practice,
Yeah,
cultivating a practice.
good.
So
Well,
thank
I'm
you.
glad. Yeah. I mean, there's that too. There's definitely um, research even about generational trauma, usually in the Jewish and Black communities, because they're such concrete and long experiences of repeated trauma. And it actually does change our cells.
Mhm.
What's really, I think, helpful about this example that we're using of changing the way we respond, if we get heated or something like that, is over time, the more we make that practice happen and the more that's accepted as a practice for the child,
Mhm.
and that ripples forward, and that then can repair, damage that was done even on that physical level, that epigenetic level. So it's
Wow.
kind of both. It's kind of like the emotional, ethereal, and then it's also like biologically based. I think
Yeah.
it's cool. And we're all kind of dealing with different versions of that. There's the ones that are in our direct family lineage of like, one that I feel like I'm trying to break is this sort of martyrdom of motherhood that we just, this is our role. Not to say that my mother had a life outside of me, absolutely, but very dedicated to a motherhood role, and less so career, and I just don't want that for myself. I want to be able to have my career and my mothering at the same time, and it's not easy, but finding ways to do that. But then we're also dealing with all of these more, so certainly as a woman, these generational traumas just that have happened to women for the entire existence of humanity, and like we all carry that. You
Yeah.
know, there's so many ways we can break those by teaching our daughters to love their bodies, or be engaged with their cycle and that kind of thing. That's a way to break some really big, right? That's just a really big thing that we've been carrying for a long time. So there's so many tangible ways I think that we can push toward um,
Mhm.
healthier relationships in that sense, because that's really what it's about. I think is cultivating those healthier relationships with ourselves and others.
Right. Well, speaking of tangible ways, I understand that you have pieces of your work that you could share with our audience members right now.
Yeah. Yeah, so I'll tell you a little bit about this project. Certainly a lot of the work I do is in person, and it's very hands-on with new mothers, doing a lot of body work, nervous system work, and identity coaching. But I thought, well, I can't do that with every single person in the world, so I will make a book that more people will have access to. Um, and so this particular book is called Who Am I Now? And it's a postpartum identity journal. So it offers prompts for the reader to think through. And I just picked one of the ones that I really enjoy about time. So I will read sort of my riff that my sort of thoughts on that, and then it opens with an exploration for you to check out and sort of feel through if that sounds good. Okay, let me pull that up. Okay, so this little section is called Time. Nothing quite impacted my sense of time like being a new mother. I never before felt time so deeply in my body as I did seeing my daughter's newborn face for the first time. I suddenly realized over the course of the early days in our journey how fleeting time is, how quickly it speeds up once you become a parent. Time began to scare me. Time reminded me of death, my own mortality in ways that I never felt prior. I have seen too that time moves differently during pregnancy. Parts of pregnancy pass by in a blink, others drag on, especially the end and birth. This is the ultimate time warp experience, especially in the recollection of it. Inside birth, Time stands still, or sometimes accelerates like a rocket. It ripples and refracts. During labor, you, your baby, and your body become the center of something powerful, something unwieldy, and yet something rooted in a deeper plane of existence than you have ever before experienced. Labor shuttles you even further than pregnancy does into a space between self and other, pain and pleasure, joy and grief, fear and courage, embodied and disembodied, and movement and stillness. You are constantly blurring the lines between various states of being or feeling, teetering at that proverbial edge, waiting for the moment where you tip forward and tumble into the foggy chasm of the postpartum. The birth becomes that clear edge, a finite moment between the before and the after. It stands to reason that the days or hours before you meet that edge are, in ways, amorphous. You need time and something unformed before you step into what is very clear and present, the new young life you are welcoming in. Those last moments of pregnancy, the intensity of knowing you are about to meet your baby, burst into fractals, your psyche splitting open and your concept of self shattering like shards of broken glass. You stand in the eye of the storm, somehow still in the buzzing energy around you, and see things fly by, not unlike Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz. The moments swirl, sometimes close, sometimes out of reach, and in your remembering of them later, they remain in the gyre. It is reflecting back that solidifies the metaphor. You immediately find yourself back in the center of the cyclone, snippets of memories churning around you. It isn't linear. There's no this happened and then that happened, unless someone else has told you what happened in their eyes. There's only the spiral. So in your reflection, without completely writing your birth story, so this would be something typically that you would write or that we would talk about in a session, and it says, you'll have space to explore your birth story in other parts of the journal. Describe your sense of time during your birth. Then describe your sense of memory recall as you take your mind back into that time space. Do the events feel linear? Do they feel spiraling? Something else? How does thinking about time in this way make you feel? Do you resonate with what I shared about time and mortality, or is that not what comes up for you? If not, what does? I know it's a lot. But yeah, take a moment to think through that.
So our giving birth story.
Mhm.
Got it. Hmm. What's coming forward for me right now is that I thought I had a linear, concrete recollection. And then as you said, what do you remember? And I was like, huh, it is a little bit more of a like what came first, like which parts were at which moment. I had twins through cesarean, and I remember, I remember some fear. They, I think, I think they had oh, a doctor who's doing their, they're not certified yet, or they're not fully, like they're doing their practicum. I
Resident?
think, yeah, a resident. I'm pretty sure a resident did my epidural, and he like missed. So I
Mhm.
had an epidural twice, which was, then I had a girlfriend was going to be giving birth a couple months later, and I said, they'll ask permission to have other people in the room besides your doctor. Say no. I mean, my experience was say no, because I didn't think that was very cool. Because then they were kind of muttering to one another about like having missed it like by inches. I remember, I just remembered being really mad, like mad about that. So that was frustrating. And now I see why they don't let the spouse. Maybe they would let a doula possibly, but I guess for that part, that shot, there is no one else in the room with you. And I have a feeling I know why, because when they messed that up, I just wonder how that your cohort, like you and you having been a doula, I wonder how a doula would respond to that, like
Coupling.
sticking someone multiple times. Yeah, so that wasn't great. But then I just remember a lot of pressure, and thankfully they preempted that of like the pressure, I guess, of like the taking out of the baby. or something. I don't know. They didn't tell me why, but they said, so you're going to feel a lot of pressure. It's going to feel like an elephant is sitting on your chest. And I'm really very visual. So I'm so glad that I was given that information, because then what happened next felt like an elephant sitting on my chest. So I was kind of glad to have the intensity of the experience given to me in such an interesting phrase that supported me. So I do remember a lot of some fear, and then of course the joy of each kid being brought over. And I think also fear in my husband's eyes a little bit, because he was with me, like holding my hand. And I think he was more scared than I was. And then, but trust, a lot of trust. Like, I guess I always knew through the whole pregnancy that, like, whatever was meant to happen, whether the kids, I mean, even if they passed, or there was a miscarriage or something, there was just this like assuredness throughout the entire thing that's like birthing or doctors or my body. It's like, well, this is what we do. Like, this is the process, whatever the process is. So that was one of the few times in my life that I've been so trusting of like everything working out. And then the kids were in the NICU for a couple of weeks. They were about 5 weeks early. So even that, even as weird as that was, like visiting your children in little glass cases, even that was just kind of like, this is just part of the process. And I had known a girlfriend who had birthed her kids way, way, way early. They were like 1 or 2 pounds each. So having known a woman of twins who had already been through so much more of an intense experience, the whole time I was like, well, we are, they're not going to be born 1 and 2 pounds. Like, we get that figured out. So yeah, very trusting.
And in recalling that, do you feel kind of like, do you resonate with that sort of being in this like spiraling? Like, it's not just this like this happened, this happened, this happened. It's more of a feeling in some ways. It's more like feeling back into that trust feeling, maybe.
Well, I appreciate you making the comparison, because it's nice to be brought back to that, because sometimes I can have the tendency to kind of grip life very tightly and get into the doing. Like, doing is what creates the next thing. Whereas while pregnant, it was like it was so much more being, just
Yeah.
kind of like allowing, surrendering.
Oh my
Yeah. So
goodness.
I appreciate you making that comparison, because it's nice to remember that deep level of trust and
Yeah.
surrender.
I really appreciate you saying that, because I think it does really highlight how differently being pregnant and being in the early postpartum and during birth, that our being is really in a different state. We
Yeah.
are stepping out of the linear and really stepping into the embodied. And sometimes people are not engaging in that during their daily lives, unless they have maybe a yoga practice or, some type of practice that does connect the body in that way. But for a lot of us, we're not experiencing that in our normal lives. And then it can be a very destabilizing shift
Yeah.
to then step into this like, oh, my body is telling me I have to pay attention now.
Yeah.
Like I have no choice but to engage with it in that way now.
Right. And then
That's
that's making me remember after once they came home, and then it felt like a lot more doing, like like bottles, and like we made all our own baby food. Like,
yeah.
so boiling carrots and blending carrots and putting them in ice cube trays, and like, like
Um,
freezing them and then thawing them.
all these little
I
cubes.
know. So yeah, that became a little bit more hectic, but still really amazing. And
Yeah.
tummy time, do you ever, tummy time, when they're like working their back muscles and their neck muscles? Oh my gosh, doing that with twins was hilarious.
There's a lot going on.
Right, but we're getting a little off topic. So I really appreciate that journal, and then how you asked of, the sentiments, like what does it feel like to think back on what the feeling was? Like, how is it landing now?
Right. Because sometimes we don't go back, enough, I think. Sometimes we go back too much. There's definitely that,
Or we only go back to the negative sometimes. Mhm.
That's why after that part, I ask people to go into their birth story a little bit deeper from different lenses. Like, tell your birth story from the story of your body. Tell the birth story from the story of your baby. Just to kind of see the different layers there. And then it's not all just this one version of the narrative. There's different stories that exist in the same time.
Yeah. I
So
love that. Wow. Tell it as if it's all negative. Tell it as if it's all positive. I love that. Yeah, because then you really get to see the opportunity for neutrality or
mhm.
and the gifts that were interwoven into
Yeah, and
that.
like what is there? What did this experience give you? Yeah,
Yeah.
I think
Yeah. Are there practices that that work for you when you are feeling like you're not connecting to your intentions and your values?
yes. I mean, I think for me, it's probably somewhat obvious. I'm a writer, so that,
Yeah.
it's writing through these different experiences can be very helpful to me. But also, I've found that I need to tell the story a few times to different people
Mhm.
to not even really looking for their feedback, but let's just say I have like a hard day or something like that. I've learned that I just need to tell certain friends, certain people. Have my mom, my best friend that are in my core group that I just need to sort of re-experience that narrative a few times before I can let it go. So that's definitely a big piece of it for me.
Mhm.
And then also in the moment, I've learned this from several mentors over the years to just go back to my embodied self in that moment, and doing that by tracking my own breath in my body. And that's such a simple thing to do, is just to focus on your breath. I mean, it's there. It's the easiest, most accessible way, I think, in a hard
Mhm.
moment to come back into ourselves when we might be mentally kind of spun out. So I try to just return to, okay, where do I feel it in my body? Is it in my chest? Do I notice it in my nose? Is it in my belly? And then that just being inside of the body really helps me kind of stop for a second before I maybe get too far, you know.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah.
especially with parenting stuff, I try to use that tool. Not that I am perfect with that. I definitely could have used that better this morning before school. But, you
It's
know,
cultivating a practice. Like that's
yeah.
going to be one of my new phrases, cultivate the practice. I've noticed through self-work, through reflection, that when I am in moments that I regret later, when I
Mhm.
think back on it, I was holding my breath.
Yeah.
Because I think, yeah, I think I go into that like some kind of a trauma story or some pain, something I don't want to feel. And so I'll react very quickly and not being fully myself, like not being the woman that I know that am. And then the holding of the breath I've noticed is can be linked to that reactivity. And so thank you for stating that simply breathing in, simply go like, it's like amazing how quickly that can just ground you
Yeah.
to yourself.
Yeah, and the more I learned about the nervous system, I mean, it really helps you understand your own behavior and the behavior of other people. And it's like, well,
Mhm.
that moment, I didn't respond very well. If I am in a fight or flight state, my brain is literally stupider because all the blood is gone and it's trying to get me to run away or beat
Yeah.
something,
So
And so that has been so helpful for me, is just to understand that aspect of my body system and myself.
right.
Um,
That thank you for painting that picture more clearly because yeah, your blood is literally rushing to your corporal, not so much your thinking, being
yes.
fully present in your thoughts, thoughtfulness, mindfulness. It's more like smash something or run away or freeze because, something could go by instead of like hitting me. Yeah, that's so interesting. I recently heard that there's also fawn, to
Yes.
fawn or to appease, which
Mhm.
some friends of mine and I've been talking about lately, that there's this fourth thing of like just say whatever needs to be said to get this person to like back away. So you're like, oh, agree with anything. Like,
Mhm.
you're right. That's interesting. That they just like hand over your power
Mhm.
because you're in danger.
It's the animal on their back saying, like,
Yeah.
we'll do that if there's vendors, like, don't hurt me, and
Yeah.
so we do that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's really been landing with me, but I hadn't really thought of that fourth. Just hand your power over to the other person or whatever it is, but fawn, like make that, you know, I don't know, put a bunch of sugariness injected into the situation to try to calm down whatever is transpiring.
Yeah, and so many of us live in these different states all the time, kind of as a baseline, and don't even realize it. And
Yeah.
then it's so much easier to then be amplified because we're already there. We're already living in a feeling threatened. It's so much easier to go to fighting or running away or these different things.
Hmm. Yeah.
But the
So
fact,
there's
yeah.
this question that's popped up in my group since the interview started. It's something that's just been kind of landing, that some individuals who I've worked with have been seeking some guidance on this. So, messages, the concept is around messages, like intuitive messages, messages from the universe, God. So for you, if someone was saying like, I don't hear messages, I don't know how to trust myself again, I don't know where intuition comes from, what when what works for you, or what would you recommend to that person who's saying, I would like to learn to listen and follow that wisdom, that inner wisdom, that knocking, if you will?
Mhm. Mhm. I mean, I think it has to start in the body. I think it really has to start with an engagement with our body because it's not something that lives outside of it in a way to me. I mean, it depends on your belief system, certainly. If it is, a more religious belief system, that might feel more external, but that's not me, so I don't know. It might be also an inner thing, but for me, it's really spending time with our body in whatever way that needs to happen for the particular thing that we need to cultivate our intuition around. So, just to give a concrete example that I really engage with often is breastfeeding, right? So, a lot of moms are feeling like they don't know how to do that. It's not coming naturally as they may have thought it was, right? But then I come and observe and I see, there's various mitigating factors happening that are controlling from the outside the breastfeeding relationship, like an app or something like that, that's saying like, oh, what side am I supposed to nurse on, timing how long I'm supposed to nurse. Maybe it's these pillow contraptions, maybe it's advice about, from the pediatrician of feeding every 3 hours or something like that. And I say, okay, let's just drop all of that for a second and let's just focus on what's right here. What do you feel in your actual breast? Which breast feels fuller? That's the side you feed on. Look at your baby. What's their behavior like? Are they doing the feeding cues, where they're all licking their lips and all that? That's when you feed your baby. That's how you cultivate this embodied relationship with this is just an example,
Yeah.
this particular way of relating to your child, right? Is through breastfeeding. And I'm like, just let it go. Delete the app off your phone. We're not going to use that anymore. I want you to start to cultivate this intuitive way of reading your own body and your baby's body in relationship together. And then you'll know when to do it because it's just going to be more clear when you're looking here, right here, and
Mhm.
not right here on the phone. So that's just to give, like a very me kind of example, because obviously that there's so many
Mhm.
ways. But
Yeah. No, thank you. That does make it practical because our body does give us signs of what we need or what we get to experience next, what
and
we
that,
get to call in.
in so many other ways as well, just for some people, it's tuning into their womb space and what is that telling them? And what is the story of this body part? Like, really just giving it the time. I mean, it's just a time thing, really. And we don't want that in this culture. We want to just be able to be like, here's the answer.
Mhm.
But the only way to cultivate that inner voice is to spend time with it.
Yeah.
And that's the practice in itself as well. So it's not easy, but it's important. And it
Mhm.
does free you up in so many ways also.
Yeah.
So yeah, that would be my example for that.
Mhm. Yeah, I appreciate that, and that gave me memories as well. Wow.
Yeah.
Well, oh, I understand that you, in your generosity, Zoe, have a gift to share with our audience, and I'd love for you to tell us a bit about it. Where can we find it? And also where can we find your work in general, like social media, etc., Facebook, or all your landing pages?
All the things. Yeah, so I've created a very short ebook for everyone that joins the series called Breaking the Mother Myths, 5 Ways New Mothers Can Step into Their Multidimensional Identities. And so it gives some steps of things that you can start doing to not get locked into that role of I'm just a mom now, the old me is gone. How can you bring back pieces of your essential self earlier on in the process so that you do feel more whole? So that's available to you on my website. And I suppose there's probably a link somewhere down below when they're watching. But my website is thememphisdoula.com. And doula is spelled DOULA. And there's like a free gift little menu page that you can just click on and submit your email, and then I will send that to you in your email. And if you are interested in working with me in a coaching capacity as a brand new mom or as a mom anywhere from a year to 20 years postpartum, I'm certainly here as well to help you find who you are and who you want to be in your journey. So that's all there on my website. And Facebook, Instagram, just my name. It's easy to find me just with my name.
Outstanding. Thank you so much. So to our audience member, we will place the proper links to receive that free gift from Zoe. You will either be receiving that in your email. So make sure to put support@andrealuzon.com into your accepted email account list. And then also please check the Awake free community on Facebook. We will have upcoming workshops on how you can up level, whether that is through your motherhood, through your listening to your intuition, just up leveling your life and reconnecting with the valuable person that you already are and always have been. So Zoe, thank you so much for your time. This has been Living Limitless with Andrea Luzon. I look forward to seeing everyone next time. Thanks.